Hello everyone, Matt from Model Minutes here, and welcome to this episode 20 of Subscriber Showcase. This is unfortunately the final episode of this series. Due to the high number of submissions I get a lot of emails every day. Unfortunately, it does mean that these submissions get lost and they get buried, and unfortunately I've run out of time to create this series. Some of you who've sent these in, you probably realize that this backlog extends to about 2 years. So if you haven't seen your submission, massive apologies. Unfortunately, they won't be shown in the future. However, if you join my Discord server, there will be other ways to participate in the channel. But for now, this episode is the final one of this series, so please don't submit any more for any future episodes, as they won't be shown. So let's start off then. We've got Average Canadian Guy who is sending in a Tamiya F51D in Korean War markings. And they picked this scheme because they wanted the challenge and to face what this challenge would look like. And I think you've done a fantastic job on this. The painting is very neat and the decals are neatly applied. It's a very nice looking F51. Up next, we've got Ezra, and this is a King Tiger from Takom in 1/35th scale. The figures are aftermarket, so there are some figures on the next slide, which we'll have a look at in a second. And there is also an STRV 103B from Trumpeter, also in 1/35 scale, which the model was airbrushed and it had good fit despite being a cheap kit. And there is an M10C from Tamiya in 1/48, and that kit was airbrushed. And it has extra details for the stowage. So you can see all of those there. You see the figures and the extra stowage. These are very nice looking tanks, a nice bit of armor. Something that I would like to get more involved in the future. I have got some tank projects sort of on the go at the moment, so stay tuned for those. Up next, we've got Flying Pizza, and unfortunately they didn't send any notes in, so I'm going to have to guess, but I'm pretty sure we've got an old vintage Tiger from Airfix and also the red tail version of the P51 from Airfix. These are very nice looking models. I'm guessing that you're pretty much just starting out on your modeling experience, but you've got some good skills there to start off with. Up next, we've got Green Freak, who is sent in a 1/48 scale BF109E7 from Airfix. I do quite like the 1/48 scale kits. I don't tend to do very many, but the extra size of a 1/48 scale kit means you get a little bit more flex with when you're building things. Things just sort of fit a little bit better, and it gives you that extra practice with painting because things aren't so fiddly. This does look to be a very well constructed aircraft with some nice subtle weathering. So up next, we've got Helen, who looks to have sent in the starter set Mustang 4 from Airfix in 1/72nd scale. This is very neatly assembled. I see that you've got a little bit of fogging around the canopy, and that's due to the polycement reacting with the plastic. So perhaps PVA glue or a different kind of glue in the future might be a better choice for that one. But thanks for sending that in. Up next is Isaac, and Isaac says that he loved my Hurricane video. So this is quite an old video now, and he got a Hurricane a result of himself. But for the moment, he sent in two models. The first one is the Lusitania, which is converted from the Mauritania, and a Trumpeter HMS Dreadnought. The Lusitania, he says, was a fun build, so we tried out some new painting techniques, and it was a good first ship to model. And the Dreadnought was a little bit more complicated, but was a fun challenge, and it had photo etched parts and rigging. And that one was finished off with some weathering powders, and they do look good too. I've got some ships in the stash, and I'll be interested in starting those at some point in the future. Here we've got James, and his Instagram is JPW_models if you want to go connect with him. And this is the 1/72nd scale Bolton Pool Defiant, and it was all brush painted by hand, and it does look very good. I've got one of these in the stash to do as well. I think it's in the same scheme. So yeah, I'm looking forward to having a go at mine, and if it turns out as well as yours, then we'll be on to a winner. Here we've got Jelly Bean 6. Unfortunately, they didn't send any notes in with this one, but it looks to be a work in progress of a, what's this, a tornado with tiger meat markings on there. It looks like you're making good progress on there, and I hope by now that this one is finished. So moving on, we've got Jim, and this is a Revell 1/72nd scale Su-33 flanker It's the first kit they've done in quite a while, so they blew away their cobwebs with this one. Everything was done by brush, apparently, and it's the first time they've tried some weathering. So you did this with a hairy stick, and I wouldn't be able to tell because the results are very smooth. It looks like it was airbrushed rather than hand painted, so very well done on this build. Here we've got Yosef, and we've got a range of finished projects, all aircraft, and we have a Hobby Boss 1/72nd scale Devotine D520, a Tamiya 1/72nd scale A6M30, Tamiya 1/72nd scale Key 61 Tony, an Airfix 1/48 scale Tomahawk Mark II-B, and an Airfix 1/48 scale P51K. These all look to be built to a very high standard. I've also built recently the 1/48 scale P40, and I rather enjoyed it. I do find the Devotine, the French aircraft, to be a very interesting subject, and I have got some French aircraft in the stash which I need to crack out and start building. Thanks for sending those in, Yosef. And here we've got Ken B. And this tank is apparently the second model they ever did. They've just gotten into modeling, so this is probably a couple of years ago. I still hope you're keeping up with the hobby. And they said that they loved it. The first model they built was an Airfix FW190, I believe. This kit, though, is a Russian T-62 BDD model 1984 by Trumpeter. And I think you've done a good job on this, despite the fact it's only your second model. We've got some very neatly applied paint and decals. The assembly looks to be really neat as well. And we've even got some lovely mud weathering on the wheels and the tracks. So thanks very much for sending that in. Up next is Kevin with another tank. This is an M4A1 in 1/72nd scale from Dragon. The fit, they say, was decent. However, there was a significant seam line between the two halves of the turret. The kit does come with a photo-etched headlight guards, but there were some holes that needed filling as a result. They said that it was a pretty decent little kit. It's quite cheap, and they used an airbrush to complete this one. And it's very neatly painted. I do have to say, I've got... I can see on the screen you've got some nice subtle weathering, some slightly different shading there, and the little details are picked out really nicely too. So thanks for taking part. And next we've got Neil. He's sent in a selection of aircraft for us to look at. A Hobbycraft 1/48 scale Bearcat in Racer paint scheme. A 1/48 scale Monogram F104, which is an old kit, but the details weren't too good. Looks like there's possibly a Mirage on the top right and a P51 down the bottom as well. All looking absolutely fantastic. I love that Bearcat though. That's a very striking colour. Here we've got Pantara, who has sent in the HMS Queen Elizabeth in 1/700 scale from Trumpeter. They say it was an amazing kit and they had lots of fun building it. It was their latest build at the time, and I hope you've built many more models since this one was done. Here we've got Roman with a couple of submissions. This is a 1/72nd scale A10 Thunderbolt 2, which is from Academy, and it was brush painted with Testors model paints. They say on the whole, it was generally quite a good kit. And then the second one is an Academy 1/72nd scale F16A. Apparently, it was the second variant of the prototype, but there was some questionable details on this one when they came to build it. Despite that, though, I think you've done a good job and it looks very convincing. Here we've got Sam, who's sent in the Airfix A4 Skyhawk in 1/72nd scale. Again, this is a kit I have in the stash, not yet started it, but it does look to be quite a nice build. They've done it in the Argentinian paint scheme, which is from the Falklands War. And if you want to connect with Sam, you can do so on their Instagram, which is Brit_scale models. Up next, we've got Sam C. Two little builds to look at. It's the Airfix 1/72nd scale Defiant, and that's painted in the Night Fighter version, which is very nice. And then we've also got the Revell Corsair. Both of them, I believe, are in 1/72nd scale. I can tell that you've spent a lot of time on these because the painting is incredibly neat and tidy. And the transfers look good too. Up next is another Sam. This is Samuel, who has sent in a TS11 Iskra from ZTS Plastic. And apparently Iskra in English means spark. So this is a Polish training jet developed and manufactured by the aircraft company PZL, and it's being used by the air forces of Poland and India. This is a nice little model that you've built here. I particularly like how you've managed to get the cockpit open so you can see inside to all the details. Here we've got Steve V, who has built the Academy P47 Razorback in 1/72nd scale. They say they probably worked harder on this model than any other they've done to date. They brush painted the grey on the bottom and used a rattle can for the top. To be fair, rattle cans, some people say it's cheating, but I think rattle cans are a great tool from scale modelers because it just makes life so much easier. They say it's not the most detailed kit and it could probably do some aftermarket stuff, but that's not what they like to do. And to be honest, I agree with you. You don't always have to add on lots of extra details. On the whole, though, I think it looks really good and the decals and paint scheme are very neatly applied. Up next, we've got Tijon, and this is a Mirage C by Academy, which was inspired by the one I did a few years back. They did notice the hole that goes effectively all the way through the aircraft, so they filled that in, and it looks as though you've done this in French colours. A nice looking model, and I hope it didn't take you too long to complete. Up next is Alesandro, who has sent in pictures of their 1/72nd scale Airfix Tomahawk 2B. I love an Airfix Tomahawk 2B, and you've done a fantastic job on this one. This seems to be completed in Battle of Britain colours, and they say that they used Tamiya paints to do this. They say the fit of the model was really good and almost no filler was required. The chipping was applied using some Tamiya XF16 aluminium, and they used a toothpick to do that. I know I'm a bit biased towards P40s, but I love the look of this one. So moving on, we've got Austin, and unfortunately Austin didn't send any notes in with their builds, but it looks as though we've got a B29 and an A6M of some description. The A6M's got a very nice neat paint scheme, but perhaps in the future on both of your models you have explored painting your canopies to make them look a little bit more finished. The B29 is quite a big build, and I hope that you enjoyed building that one as well. And I did build a B29 in my youth, and it's probably in the garage somewhere in 100 different bits. Moving on, we've got Benjamin. Benjamin finished this 1/76 scale Airfix M4 Sherman. So this is the vintage classic Sherman. At the time, this was their 4th tank model. They experimented with the AK acrylic paints that they found at their local hobby store, and they liked the result. They've done a bit of discoloration on this one to make it look a bit more weathered. And they said it wasn't too bad despite the fact it's a 1960s tooling. And yeah, I agree, the vintage classic Sherman isn't that terrible. You can get a reasonable representation from it. Moving on, we've got David, and they said that this was the best Airfix kit they've done so far. This was the 1/72nd scale MiG-17F, nicknamed Fresco. Very good fit to the model, and they used Vallejo model air paint to complete it, and it does look to be very nicely assembled. The painting's applied neatly, the decals don't have any silvering, and there seems to be a panel line wash on the panels as well, which makes it look very convincing and ties in that nice silver work. That little display base as well is pretty good too, with the little oil drum. I love it when people put them on little display bases, and that's something I'd like to do more of in the future. And speaking of display bases, on this one, you can see Edward has built the Revell rebox of the Matchbox Panzer II, I think it was, with its little display base down in the bottom right. I've built one of these, and it was an absolutely fun little build. I'd love to see more kits being released with little diorama bases. Top right looks to be a Revell B17. I could be wrong, it could be from a different manufacturer. Unfortunately, we've got no notes. Bottom left is an Avro Shackleton, and above that is a Buccaneer, which I'm presuming is the 1/72nd scale Airfix kit. All of these builds are very neatly presented, and I can tell that you put a lot of time and work into creating them. Up next then, we have the one from the thumbnail, and it is Grant, who has sent in their first aeroplane model after 4 years of making Gundam and Star Wars kits. Well, I think your Gundam and Star Wars kits experience have really helped you here, because this 1/48 scale Eduard Roland C2 is amazing. They said that they say that there was a huge learning curve as they've never done photo etch or rigging before, but you've gone ahead and you put in like all those little tensioners and things. The paint work on this is really neat. One thing I can say though is that you've definitely got more patience than me. So thanks for sending that one in. And up next is Ian. They say this was only their 4th model kit and that it looks pretty good. It's the 1/35th scale DML BR DM3. They chose to model theirs after the East German one, as the paint they had was close to that one. This was done with an airbrush, which was their first time doing so, and they got the paint to thin correctly, which was a learning curve, I think. I found when I started doing airbrushing, it was a bit of a learning curve, but then once you get into it and get the hang of it, the more you do, the better you get. They say they'd recommend this kit to anyone, but it's not necessarily a beginner build. But I think you've done a very nice job with this one, and the painting is applied very neatly. So up next is James, and James has completed a Lancaster, and it looks to be the Mark III version, a Spitfire PR19, and they really enjoyed that model as well. And then bottom right, we've got an Spitfire Mark 1A. I'm going to hazard a guess that these are potentially all the Airfix kits, but you've not left those in the notes. On the whole, though, it looks to me as if you're really enjoying building the models because you've managed to get some big kits out of the way first, especially that Lancaster. Did notice on yours, perhaps you needed a little bit more work around the engine nacelle because they seem to be a little bit lower and not quite matching the wings. But on the whole, though, these are some very impressive builds. Up next is Johnny. Johnny has sent in an Airfix 1/72nd scale Curtiss Hawk 81A2, which is effectively a P40, and it's in the Flying Tiger scheme. I've done one of these, and yours looks very nice indeed. Slightly different paint colors to what I did, but on the whole, still quite convincing. I can see you've done some nice chipping on there as well. They did mention that they added some black chalk dust for some greasy, dirty weathering as well. Perhaps your painting was a little bit too thick in a few places though, because it does seem that there are a few brush marks, but that's something that you can practice on in future builds. Every single build that we do something different, and we improve it slightly. Up next is Juice, and they've sent in quite a selection. We've got a Revell 176 Sharp B1 and Peugeot F17, which is top right, which I believe is an old Matchbox tooling. A 1/72nd scale Airfix Grumman Martlet, which is down bottom center. A Revell 1/144th scale Grumman F14 Top Cat, which is above the Martlet. The Revell 176 T34, which is on the right hand side of the screen, possibly an old Matchbox kit again. And an Airfix 1/72nd scale Curtiss Tomahawk on the left, and top left is a Revell 1/144th Harrier. Apparently, they were all hand painted with Humbrol and Revell Aqua colours, and they said they didn't have any real issues with assembling them, and they used varnish to prevent the decals from silvering. A good selection there of aircraft from both modern and past times, and some tanks as well to go with them. Again, we've got some of those Matchbox or Revell X Matchbox diorama sets, which are really nice, and I'd love to get my hands on some more of those, and a P40, of course, because who doesn't love a P40? Moving on is Costas, and this is his 1/72nd scale A6 Intruder from Italeri. This was from their Gulf War series. They say the kit didn't have any major issues, it went together well, and it came with cartograph decals, which really helped to make that model pop. The kit was brush painted with Model Master and Vallejo, and the weathering was done with AK Interactive products, and you can connect with them on their Instagram, scale_models_gr. And you're saying that this was hand painted with a hairy stick, and that's insane because the paintwork looks absolutely fantastic. If you told me this was airbrushed, I would believe you. The weathering on there is really good as well. This is an absolutely fantastic looking model. Up next is Man Cupboard Models, and you've not sent in any notes on this one, but I'm going to hazard a guess that this is the Airfix Jet Provost. I'm not sure what scale, possibly 1/48 scale, but if it is 1/72nd scale, it makes your paintwork on this even more impressive. The paintwork is very neatly applied, especially given the fact that it is a slightly complicated paint scheme with the various different areas being different colors. This sort of paint scheme does put me off because it is quite a lot of work to get to look right, but it's very neatly finished and an absolutely great looking aircraft. Up next, we have Marsbar 709. On the left, we've got a Folland Gnat, which appears to have had a bit of an accident on the runway. They said they had a different experience to when I built mine in my video, and they said it was covered in flash and things just didn't fit together well. I didn't have that experience. I found the kit to be very well designed, but as a result, because they had all these troubles with it, they've made it into a little diorama where the aircraft has suffered a landing incident. On the right, though, is a Tamiya 135 Tiger 1, and they said that kit was absolutely fantastic, and you've done a good job of that one with some nice weathering as well. Up next, we've got Matthew, and he has sent in a BAEC Harrier FA2 in 1/72 scale. This is the Airfix kit. They said the fit was good, the decals were good as well, they were nicely printed, and it does come with a choice of drop tanks or air-to-sea missiles. And as the air-to-air weapon, you get the choice of 4 AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles or 2 mid-range air-to-air AMRAAMs. So you can put the refueling probe on or leave it off, but they decided to go with the on option. You also get to choose 2 30mm machine guns or rails, but they decided to add the machine gun, and they recommend the kit. This is a very nice looking model. I think that you may have painted your pilot whilst he was inside the cockpit, so I probably suggest doing him before and then adding him in later, just so you get a slightly neater result. But on the whole, a very nice looking model. Up next is that Chonarl, and this is a diorama made from foam, which was cut out into a grid shape, weathered with a chalk pastel powder and Tamiya panel line accent color, and the tank is a 1/72 scale of LT55. This looks very good as well. I love seeing these little dioramas, these little vignettes. They look absolutely brilliant, and they help to make your model stand out and look a little bit more unique. Thanks for sending that in, and we move on to our final submission for this final episode, and where better to finish than with the Golden Spitfire. Owen hasn't sent in any comments about this kit, but I'm going to hazard a guess that this is possibly the 1/72 scale kit, or perhaps actually the 1/48 scale kit, seeing as it does have those walkway transfers from Airfix. That being said, though, it is a complete guess. However, I do love the fact that you've painted this in gold, because it does make a very unique Spitfire to stand out on your shelf. And with that, that is it. As mentioned at the beginning of this episode, this is the final episode of this series, because I simply can't keep up with the amount of submissions, and it does take an awful lot of work to create these videos. And sadly, with my limited amount of time to create content, this is one of the series I've had to discontinue. But it doesn't mean that is the end. If you would like to have your models featured in a video of this kind of style, I will still be doing them for the group builds conducted on my Discord server, and there is a link to the server down below. So if you want to have your work featured on the channel, then you must take part in one of the group builds and submit them following the rules on the server. As always, though, a quick shout out to my channel members and patrons for the extra support they give the channel. A massive thanks to these guys on screen. For more information about how you can get involved and help support me a little further to justify all the hard work and time that I spend on creating this content, then take a look at the links in the description. Down there as well, there are other ways to help support the channel if you so wish, which range from just one-off donations and even purchasing things on the Amazon storefront, which means that I get a kickback from every purchase you make on Amazon or on the other various sites listed. If, though, you'd like to support the channel for free, subscribing with notifications turned on will mean you never miss a modelling video. For now, though, the last thing to say is a massive thank you to you for watching and for all the people who've submitted things over the years, and I'll see you on the workbench again next time.